Hello, everyone. I just want to say welcome to Mr. Lerry Knox. It's really an honor and a privilege to have him here and to be able to share a lot of information with everyone. So, Larry, please tell everyone about yourself.
Well, thank you, Professor. It's my privilege and pleasure to be here. I've heard a lot about you guys. Mr. Akpan, or Professor Akpan, has spoken very highly about all of his students, and I must admit, you guys asked some very good questions in leading up to this event. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get to all of them, but I did pick out a few that I thought would be fairly interesting and perhaps a little bit more general that a lot of people ask, if not the same question, something very general or close to it. So my background, so I'm the CEO of Untitled Capital. It is a merchant bank headquartered here in Chicago. It's a global investment bank. And what we specialize in is infrastructure investment, both hard and soft infrastructure assets. What are hard infrastructure assets? Hard infrastructure assets are assets that are very similar to the assets that you use every day, public works, so bridges, roads, water, sewer, electrical utilities, power, etc. The hard physical assets that make up a community, a city, or a state. Then also soft infrastructure assets. Soft infrastructure assets are assets that are tend to be social in nature, such as building schools and funding for schools, hospitals, recreation centers, museums, and the like. So that's what I focus on, and what I do is I bring private capital to the table to augment public spending to build our infrastructure assets, both nationally and globally. Is it a big problem? This is a huge problem. You can't really turn on TV without talking about our infrastructure deficit as far as spending is concerned. Globally, this is at least a $54 trillion problem by some conservative estimates, and some have it as high as hundreds of trillions of dollars. So that's the space that I focus in on, and my journey to becoming an infrastructure financier, for some may seem kind of a circuitous route, but for me it was very straightforward. Started out as an engineer building large infrastructure projects. I just went from running and managing infrastructure projects to financing those same infrastructure projects. So that kind of gives you a summary and a brief outline of who I am and what I do.
Thank you very much. Very interesting story. Very interesting story. I have one question before we get into the actual question. What role has your education? I mean, you had a long educational journey. If you could touch on that, how has that helped you in your career path, your experience?
That's a good question. And the irony is that I literally have every degree but an MD. So I have a bachelor's in metallurgical materials engineering, I have a master's in nuclear engineering, I have an MBA and a law degree. Out of all of those degrees, they've all proven to be very important and very worthwhile to helping me where I am today. I would say that I did not need all of them to do what I do today. However, you know, when you start out and you're young and you're trying to figure your way forward in life, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you pursue paths to gain knowledge, to enlighten yourself, to figure out what it is that you do need to understand. And along the way, I've been able to peel off little components of every single aspect of all the degrees that I have that have formed to help me do what I do today.
I've got one more question.
Okay.
So you started out in engineering and now you're in finance. How did that happen?
How that happened was I went from being a project engineer and leading these large infrastructure projects that were tremendously valuable and important for our country's security, to recognizing that you know, that what I really would like to do kind of long term in my career at that time, I was in my 20s, that I wanted to finance these projects instead. So that's what I did. So I shifted from the engineering side of the house, if you will, to the finance side of the house. And as part of that shift, I went back to school and earned my MBA and my law degree to allow me to retool, to bring in some of the skill sets that I felt that I was lacking. So I got my MBA, and my concentration for my MBA was in financial engineering and derivatives. And for law, my concentration was in securities and intellectual property. And all those have all, kind of meshed together to help me do the business that I do today.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the students have really put together some really great questions. So if you could just take some time and just cover some of those.
Sure. Well, actually, your first two questions were the first two questions on the list from the students. So everybody's
minds think alike, right?
Exactly right. You did a great job preparing your students because they asked the questions that you did.
Awesome.
One of the interesting questions that was asked was, how did I manage the transition from the Navy and engineering into the finance profession? So the a little bit slightly different in that aspect is dealing with the Navy. And what did that help me do? So one of the things that was really interesting in the transition from being a military officer to the civilian world, so to speak, was the difference in the hierarchy, right? So in the military, it's a very hierarchical organization. Then once you get into the civilian work, it's much more fluid, less structured, and more dynamic. But one of the aspects I felt has been very important to my success to this point has been the ability to translate the leadership skills that I earned while I was in the military to applying them into the civilian sector.
It's interesting.
Let me get the next question.
A lot of great questions.
Yeah, the other was, so it's part of my career, so maybe you did a really good job, a thorough research, if you will, on my background. So the first job that I had in the transition from being an engineer to finance was working as a venture capitalist. And there I worked as a venture capitalist at a firm called Open Prairie Ventures, which was an early stage venture capital firm in central Illinois, in Champaign and Effingham. And what we were investing in were early stage technologies that were being spun out of the university system. So this is working with all the Big Ten schools, other universities from around the country, as well as our research labs. So my first job there was really looking at how do we able to commercialize these new technologies. So at the time, this is, call it the early 2000s, late 90s. And what I was right at the dot-com bust first time, if you will. And so what I was focused on was looking for, the Netscape, which today sounds interesting because I don't know if people really know what Netscape is, but Netscape is the fundamental user interface, if you will, the first user interface to how we access the internet, and it's largely the basis of Internet Explorer and Safari and many of these other internet browsers. So what I was really focused on was taking the technology and the research that our government was developing and looking for those next opportunities of being able to leverage the investment from research dollars that our federal government spends, and then taking those technologies and those kernels and then commercializing them on a major scale.
Okay. That's very interesting.
Another good question was it hard getting through so many years of school, and how did I manage?
That's a great question.
Focus. Really simple. For me, it was a matter, I guess you can say it was kind of that military training, if you will, which is you identify what your goal is, right? What do you intend to do with this degree when you're done? And how are you going to put it to use and be able to articulate that story, not only to others, but definitely to yourself? And as long as you understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, it's really easy to accomplish the goals in between point A and point B. And so for many times, the point A to point B, one of the means to that end was earning a degree to fill in gaps that I had in my experience or education. So I really enjoyed school. I was a fairly decent student. So even though it was a total, if I add it all together, I'm probably approaching 12 years of education. But it was all, very enjoyable, and met some of my best friends in my life that are still dear to me today through that process.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, one more. So let's another question. We'll just continue along those lines. What were your main goals to making sure that you finished what you started? That comes again back down to focus. It's about understanding what it is that you're trying to accomplish and achieve, and what are the requisite steps that you think that you need at that moment in time to achieve those goals. And the only thing that I would add to that is the opportunity or the flexibility for change, because you don't know what you don't know. And an old military adage is that no plan has ever survived contact with the enemy. So as you actually start to pursue and work down your path, things are going to happen. Life happens. Other things get in the way, whether it's work related or just anything and everything. And being able to remain flexible while still never leaving focus for what your goals are and that you have in mind, and then just continue to take the steps to get there.
Now I have one more question for you. Now this is a finance class, and you've taken finance, obviously. How do you see this course or the skills that are learned in this class? How will this help the students in the real world?
Well, what they do is they provide a good basis for understanding, right? So the finance industry is a very, very large industry, multifaceted, right? So you have sales, you have trading, you have investment banking, you have project finance, you have securities, you have brokerage work, you have asset management, you have hedge funds. It's a large, multi-dimensional global industry. And at this moment in time, what you're able to do is you're able to learn some of the basics as it relates to understanding the finance skills that you can then use as part of your development and growth.
Okay. Any parting words of wisdom or any advice you can give, this great group of students?
No, just keep up the good work. You guys ask great questions. That lets me know that you're all very smart. And I look forward to hopefully running into you in the industry one day.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank everyone for all of the great questions. This is really a great opportunity, a great exchange that we were able to put together. And thank you again, Larry, for taking the time to share with the students here.